On today's show, I am live in Glendale, Arizona, just after the UConn Huskies win the national championship. But on this podcast, we'll be talking about the Atlanta Hawks and the latest on Trae Young, as well as a preview of Hawks Heat on Tuesday, and all of that is coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1690 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the night here on a Monday and a Tuesday. In fact, it's now Tuesday morning as I'm recording this podcast, and my apologies for the audio quality / background noise challenges. If you are seeing this on YouTube, you can already see this in the background, but I am currently in the stadium post-game of the national championship game out in Arizona. I've been covering college basketball the last several days, and my apologies for that, but this is the one time I'm going to give you a bonus podcast between now and when I return home to Atlanta. So it was a good opportunity. And if you hate the audio quality, you can log off now. My apologies, but plenty to get into on the Hawks side of things. But first, today's podcast is brought to you by folks at LinkedIn Jobs. If you find the most qualified candidates that you want to talk to and help you do it faster, post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Terms and conditions apply. And also, I encourage you at the top of the podcast to make us your first listen each and every day. Please check us out and subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. We're also on YouTube, and again, anywhere you get your podcasts. I've been in Glendale for a while. It'll be a little bit shorter of a podcast than usual, but I do want to get something to you before the travel that I have on the agenda on Tuesday. And that was sort of buoyed by the fact that Trae Young now has an official update from the Hawks. So taking you back, Trae, of course, tore the ligament in his finger on February 23rd. He had surgery on that finger on February 27th. So it's been 6-ish weeks, something like that. And basically, he had a 6-week follow-up on Monday as I record this podcast, in which also Trae kind of foreshadowed that on his own podcast a few days ago. I referenced that on the most recent episode of this podcast on 1689 a couple days ago. But essentially, Trae was talking about how he's going to meet with the doctor on Monday, et cetera, et cetera. Not a ton of information from the Hawks here, but it is an official update, and the Hawks have said that he is, quote, cleared for team practice and contact, end quote. So what we know right now is that he's, again, just that. He's clear for practice and contact. That's a huge step in his rehab process. Of course, that means he's going to have his brace off. I'm sure that there'll be something on that hand in the meantime, but his big cast is off. His brace after that is off. That's a positive thing. He's now officially out for the game on Tuesday, which we'll talk about later on in this podcast. That will be his 23rd straight missed game for the Hawks. And I saw some people confused by this. Like the update came down before the Hawks injury report came out. And he was ruled out immediately after that. And people were like, why is he ruled out? Well, basically, I think it's fairly obvious, but you don't have a guy play in a game 24 hours after he's cleared to begin contact and practice for the first time. I know practices are not always the most well-covered things, and fans don't really care about practices, but if a guy has not played basketball, and he has played basketball in 6 weeks plus, he's not going to play a game tomorrow. That's the reality. But we'll see about Wednesday. The Hawks do have a back-to-back here on Tuesday and Wednesday at home. But for me, the goal should basically be, if he's able to play, to have him on the court at some point this week, so he's not trying to debut in the play-in a week from Wednesday. I'm in Arizona, and I'm guessing here a little bit, but I think I might circle Friday in Minnesota as a potential return spot for Trae. He could go as soon as Wednesday. I'm not saying he can't go on Wednesday, but I think it's plausible he can come out. Actually, if needed, he could play for the first time on Sunday in the finale of the regular season and just play a little bit there, get his feet wet, and then ramp it up for the play-in on Wednesday, because the Hawks will have Monday and Tuesday off to prepare for that game on Wednesday. Trae famously is in great shape, works very hard, and because it was not a lower body injury, he can actually run and stay active. That's a very helpful thing to get back faster and be up to playing shape and playing wind and physicality faster. But everyone will tell you, including star players, that playing in a game versus playing in practice and staying on a treadmill or whatever, not the same thing. So we'll see how that sort of ramps up. But obviously, huge positive that he's now been cleared to practice and have some contact, and we'll see how fast he can get on the court from there. There are, of course, play-in implications with regard to Trae coming back. So no matter what anyone tells you, and people are saying all kinds of stuff right now, in my view, I think it's pretty clear the Hawks are better with Trae Young available, and they have a better chance to make the playoffs as far as the 18 playoffs if he is playing than if he is not playing. That shouldn't be controversial. I don't know when it became controversial, but that's the way that I view things. With that said, the math of it all is not really in the Hawks' favor to make the playoffs. Now, again, that's just the math side, but the reality is the Hawks are going to be in the 9-10 game. They've already clinched that, so they have to win 2 games to make the playoffs, and they can't lose. There's no margin for error. So just that simple fact alone, when you have to go 2-0 in a 2-game sample size, that's always tough. Now, there's a chance the 9-10 game is in Atlanta, but it's more likely to be in Chicago at this point in time. As I'm recording this podcast, the Hawks are a game behind with 4 games to play, and the Bulls have the tiebreaker. That's an important thing to remember here. So let's say the Bulls go 2-2 in the last 4. That's usually what they've been about doing this year, a 500-ish team. If they go 2-2 in the last 4, the Hawks have to go 4-0. And that's possible, but the Hawks have 2 road games and a game on Tuesday that they're actually underdogs in despite being at home. So the likelihood of the Hawks going 4-0, it's not impossible by any means, but not likely to happen. So anyway, the math will tell you that the Hawks are probably going to be playing on the road in the 9-10 game in Chicago next week. Factoring that in, I would say even with the Hawks on the road, it's close to 50-50 that they can win that game. I think the Hawks with Trae are better than the Bulls. I have some conviction about that, but the game is in Chicago. Keep that in mind. If it's in Atlanta and Trae plays, the Hawks should be favored in that game, I think. If it's in Chicago and Trae plays, it's more of a flip situation. I'll just say this now. It is worth noting it's a tiny, tiny, tiny sample size, but no 10 seed has made the playoffs under the current rules. That's logical because that means 2 road games in a row. Now, it's going to happen at some point. It's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be this year. It'll happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So if they beat the Bulls, either in Atlanta or in Chicago, you got to go on the road to face either Miami, Philadelphia, or potentially Indiana if they backslide. The Hawks can win that game, even on the road. But they're going to be underdogs in that game, given that they're on the road against a team that's probably seen as being better than they are. Now, with Trae, I don't think there's a huge gap between Miami and Atlanta or Indiana and Atlanta. That might just be me being wrong, but that's my opinion. But anyway, they'll be on the road. They'll be underdogs, at least in the betting market in that game, I would guess. So let's take a baseline reading here. Let's just say the Bulls game is 50-50. And the second game, no matter where it is, it'll be on the road. Let's say the Hawks have a 35% chance of winning that game. Let's just say that's a baseline read. That means the Hawks have about an 18% chance of winning 2 games in a row from a cold, calculating math standpoint. That's tough. Now, more optimistically, you could say this. The Hawks are 60-40 against the Bulls. I kind of believe that, honestly. But to be really positive, let's say 50-50 against Miami or Philly or Indy. Again, that's pretty optimistic. That's still only 30% chance by the numbers of making the playoffs. That's the price of being in the 9-10. That's the price of not having a good season for the Hawks all the way through. So all that said, uphill battle on some level, but we will see. The Hawks have been very good in the play-in. You might remember this. The Hawks beat the Heat soundly in the play-in in the year when Miami went to the finals. So stuff can happen. The Hawks are 3-0 in the play-in all the time. That's well documented. Trae's been really good in the play-in, by the way. Last year, he had 25-8-7. The year before, he averaged 31-10 in 2 play-in wins. Like, the Hawks are kind of the team of the play-in, as funny as that is. That's not where you want to be by any means, but they've been very good when they've had to play in the play-in. So, look, Trae's the best player on the court in a Hawks-Bulls game. If Trae is Trae, he is better than anybody the Bulls have. Now, less so in a game against somebody, Miami or Indiana or Philadelphia. Philadelphia's got a beat back. Indiana, Halliburton is very good, obviously. The Heat have playoff Jimmy, all that stuff. I still have my chances if I'm the Hawks, generally speaking, I guess, against those teams. But I think I would prefer, if I was the Hawks, to not see Philadelphia. But even then, they've beaten Philadelphia on the road in some pretty important spots in the past. So all that said, there's a lot of reasons for optimism right now. We'll see what Trae looks like. There might be some rust there. It's been a long time. But big picture, having Trae Young back should give you optimism. I know not everybody believes that. I think there's certainly become a larger faction that believes the Hawks are, quote-unquote, better without Trae. I don't believe that. But it is a little bit interesting to throw him into the mix again after this long with this small of a sample size to kind of get things ready to go. So interesting challenges ahead. I'll cover all 4 games and the play and stuff, as I always do on this podcast, but a lot to get to. But Trae has been clear for practice. He's been clear for contact, and we will see if he returns on maybe Wednesday or maybe Friday or maybe Sunday. But as of now, he's ruled out for Tuesday, and we'll leave it there for now. All right, we'll have more coming up on a preview of Hawks Heat in a second. But first, a word from our sponsors on the podcast today. Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the roles that you have to offer. That's why you should check out those at LinkedIn Jobs. They have tools that you like to look for to find the right professionals for your team. They do it faster and they do it for free. I've been hiring people for my day job for quite a long time at this point in time. And the folks at LinkedIn Jobs have been huge to make that process entirely easier and much more efficient. And those small businesses are often wearing 30 different hats in the sports world and beyond. And they might not have time to have resources or to hire people properly. LinkedIn is not just another job board. They have a network of more than 1 billion professionals. That makes it the best possible place to hire someone. It gives you access to professionals that you can't find anywhere else. And they also do it all, but making the process easy and intuitive for you. Hiring is much, much, much easier when you have that many qualified candidates in the mix. It's so easy. In fact, 80% of businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. And they also find ways to make the process easier for you. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn Jobs for hiring purposes. You can post your job for free by going to linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That is linkedin.com/lockedonnba. Terms and conditions apply. Today's show is brought to you by GameTime, and GameTime is now an authorized ticket marketplace in Major League Baseball that makes getting tickets even faster and easier for you. They have killer last-minute deals, all on prices, views from your seats, and the lowest possible price guarantee. That means GameTime is a fantastic option, makes things easy for you when you're buying tickets. I've been a regular user of the GameTime app for quite some time now. It's come in a lot of handy for me on Braves tickets, Falcons tickets, all that kind of stuff across the board. And they save 6% when buying last-minute tickets at sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and much more. They have flash deals you can save and also save even more when you choose a section. Let GameTime actually choose the seats for you in that section. They have an awesome feature where you can toggle up to show the total up to amount that you're looking for up front. No surprise fees when you get that checkout. That's very, very helpful for planning purposes. You also get a panoramic view from your seats in the app before you buy, and you're getting the lowest price, or GameTime's going to credit you 110% of the difference in that price. Your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the industry, including event cancellation protection and on-time ticket delivery. Take all of the guesswork out of buying tickets right now with the GameTime app. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the GameTime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, and before we get out of here on an abridged version of Locked on Hawks podcast, I do appreciate you listening to the show. The Hawks play again on Tuesday in Miami. Only have 4 more games left in the season, and the last 2 home games are Tuesday and Wednesday in back-to-back fashion for the Hawks. And given that they have to probably, not definitely, but probably go on the road for the 9-10 game, this might be the last 2 games at home all year. We'll see on all of that, of course. The first one of those, of course, is on Tuesday against Miami. It's the last of 4 meetings against the Heat this year. The Hawks have actually lost 2 of those first 3. They've been struggling to score against Miami in the first 3 meetings. They only have 110 offensive rating in those games. Poor true shooting. They have a 17% turnover rate in 3 games against Miami this year. The Heat are very good in turning you over defensively in general, and they're also quite good on the defensive glass. Keep that in mind. I will say, not a tough matchup necessarily defensively for the Hawks. Personnel-wise, maybe a little bit with Jimmy Butler, and the Hawks having to have kind of big wing stuff against him. But Miami is better offensively when they're close to full strength, like they kind of are right now, but they're bottom 10 in the league in offensive rating this year. They're below average in shooting efficiency. They're below average in offensive rebounding. They get to the line a lot, that's for sure. And they take care of the ball pretty well on offense as well. That's 2 areas I'm really focusing on in this game, is not fouling and also either creating turnovers or at least not getting mauled in the turnover battle, because the Heat do like to play that way. Injury stuff. As I mentioned before, Trae is not playing. He's already been ruled out. That's not a huge surprise. So the Hawks still have 5 guys out of the lineup. Of course, Trae Young, Okongwu, AJ Griffin, Seth Lundy, and Saddiq Bey is out for the season. The same set of guys who played over the weekend for the Hawks they're going to be available this time around. By the way, while we're here, a couple questions about Okongwu and Griffin that I got in the last couple of days. Both guys are due to be reevaluated in the next day or 2 or 3. The last update was actually a week ago. As I'm recording this podcast, it should be checked out again in 7 to 10 days. So we'll see. Honestly, on AJ Griffin, he wouldn't play anyway, if I had to guess at this point. Even if he comes back this year, I don't think he's going to be available to play. I should say available, likely to play in the rotation. Now, Okongwu is much more pressing as far as the impact for this year. It certainly would not be a huge surprise if he just missed the rest of the season, honestly, given that he's still out at this point. It's a short turnaround. That's kind of the thing what I'm saying with Trae recently is, like, it's a photo finish. I think with Trae, it's he could sort of stay in shape because it was not a leg injury, etc. Okongwu probably is not in the best shape right now considering it's a toe injury. It's not his fault. It's just what you can't train. We have a toe issue, and he's still not playing, not practicing. We'll see, but I would kind of plan, if I was you, to not have Okongwu moving forward, but we'll see. Anyway, that's the latest on those guys, and the Hawks will be, again, down 5 players. Although, obviously, Griffin and Lundy have come out of the mix most of the year. Bey is out for the season, so it's mostly just attention paid to Trae and Onyeka at this point. As for Miami, Terry Rozier, who they acquired at the deadline, is questionable to play. Josh Richardson is out. Miami is always like hilarious with injury reports, like hilarious. They don't really have too much candor on these things, but they have 5 guys listed as probable. That includes Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, Kevin Love, etc. I would assume they all play, but you kind of never know with Miami. And also Jimmy Butler will just pop up every once in a while in the injury report. He's not listed right now, but TBD on that. Right now, as I'm recording this podcast, the Hawks are 3.5-point underdogs at home, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Honestly, it's been a while since the Hawks have had a lot of close projected games. In fact, the Hawks have either been big underdogs or big favorites in 7 of the last 8 games because they've either played really bad teams who are banged up or they played really good teams and all that stuff. So, like, it's been a little bit strange. In fact, the only time the Hawks have played a game that was projected to be close in the last 8 games was actually against Chicago. It's kind of fairly similar in that Chicago and Miami, Miami's better than them, but the game was in Atlanta this time around versus the game being in Chicago the last time they played a close game. So all that said, we'll see if the Hawks show up to play at their absolute best. It might be the last game without Trae for a while. We'll see how they sort of handle that. And the Hawks and the Heat always play close games, obviously the playoff series and play-in matchups, etc. Long-term rivals of some level. Jimmy's playing for the Heat. Bam probably playing. So stay tuned for that. We'll have hopefully a breakdown of that game afterwards on Tuesday, provided travel takes care of me on Tuesday. But all that said, we'll kind of get out of here now on again a shorter version of the podcast than usual. But hopefully you enjoy this little extra pop-in live from a football stadium, honestly, covering a basketball game. Please subscribe to this podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. We're also on YouTube as well as Overcast and Pocket Cast, all those places. Please like, share, rate, review, all that fun stuff. Tell a friend about the podcast. Hopefully you have done that already. We also have regular bonus episodes on the audio-only feeds of this podcast from the folks at Locked on Sports Atlanta. They do postcasts after Hawks games, and those are in the same feed as mine, just some extra content if you enjoy that. They have their own YouTube channel, but if you want to listen to all that on the audio side, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, etc. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked on Hawks. Follow me there as well at BT Rowland. I'm also doing some Atlanta sports coverage on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/BT Rowland. Some Hawks writing, some sharing of clips. This podcast is not affiliated with that, but just some extra Hawk stuff and as well as some Brave stuff as well from my personal standpoint. So all that said, please subscribe to the podcast, tell a friend, and we'll see you later on this week.